Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing well. Got the weekend off. Gonna relax. Go to the gym. Maybe watch the Pro Bowl. Definitely gonna watch the Royal Rumble Sunday night. But it's gonna be a good weekend, man. How's things on your end?
Things are good. Obviously, you have the Senior Bowl tomorrow too. That's another thing happening this weekend. So, there's certainly a lot going on with the Senior Bowl, Pro Bowl, Royal Rumble. I know that's going to be exciting. That's maybe the top event besides WrestleMania that I for sure watch every year in terms of wrestling. So that's certainly going to be fun on Sunday night. But it's never a dull day around here, Jack, in terms of Cleveland Browns news and updates and whatnot. And unfortunately, we have another run-in to discuss. And on Tuesday, Kareem Hunt was cited for speeding in Rocky River. The thing that makes it more notable is that in a police report, it stated that marijuana was found in the car. It's reportedly not his, that it was a family member's. But Jack, after having a long list of different incidents during his time in the NFL, how big of a deal should this be for Browns fans?
When you look at it simply as like the marijuana thing shouldn't be a big deal anymore. I'm pretty sure at the next CBA they are going to take that off the banned substance list. But at the end of the day, it's still a banned substance as things sit now. And there's a lot of people saying, oh, this shouldn't be a big deal. The big deal is Kareem Hunt continues to surround himself with bad influences and puts himself in potential bad situations, much like this one. The whole speeding thing, it happens. Anybody that drives or has drove, speeding tickets happen a lot. Everybody feels the need for speed. The thing with Kareem Hunt, you'd think he would have learned to put himself surrounded with better people after the domestic violence incident a couple years ago. But ever since then, he still surrounds himself with the wrong people. We know his family's history. His dad has had a history of substance abuse. The incident at the club where there was a fight involved, he wasn't in it, but he was there. And now this, it's like, and I know a lot of Browns fans want Kareem Hunt to stick around not only for 2020, but beyond. But you have to seriously sit down, and I think Paul DePodesta, Jimmy Haslam, Kevin Stefanski, and whoever's going to be the GM are going to sit down and try to figure this out with Kareem Hunt. Is he worth the risks that come with him to keep him around? Obviously, during the season, he paid his suspension, came back, everything was quiet. He was a good model citizen for the Browns. But if he continues to surround himself with bad influences, you have to wonder if he's worth all that just to keep around, just because the talent. Because we've seen it time and time again. Just because you have talent doesn't mean you're worth what the time that the Browns will put an investment into.
Yeah, it goes back to something that Stefanski said in his introductory press conference. Personalities are welcome, production is required. And, if it gets to a point where I'm not saying he's going to get suspended for this, but if he continues to go down this path and somehow finds himself suspended again, there's no way he's going to be here. But Jack, if you're Stefanski, Jimmy Haslam, whoever the GM that we hire, if you're that person, what do you do with Kareem Hunt? What would you do?
you look at him for what he's done so far for the Browns, you bring him back. You give him that second round tender or the original round tender, and the plan is to bring him back. But if someone does come calling and say, hey, we'll give you a mid-round pick, you have to strongly consider it. Just because, Kareem's probably only going to be here for the 2020 season. If you can flip him and perhaps, draft a running back, Jack Duffin, who is a contributor at our site, The Dogland, wrote a great article listing out all the potential options we can do with Kareem Hunt. Would you rather pay him I think it's the $3 million, or would you rather flip that for a guy that you can keep for 4 years of control, draft another running back by chance? If I'm the Browns, you strongly consider that. But at this point, the plan would be to bring him back. Him and Nick Chubb are a nice solid 1-2 punch at the running back position. And Kareem was productive. And, he is a viable threat in the offensive game. But like I said, you have to worry about some of the choices he makes off the field. And I'm sure those will play into the equation once they get down to the point of deciding what they plan to do with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I think there's a proper role for him. I don't think that he was necessarily utilized to the best of his ability last season, and that was a common theme for the entire offense. I would say this. If you can get a better draft pick than what you would potentially get as a compensation pick if you were to let him walk as an unrestricted free agent next year, take the deal in a heartbeat. Take the for sure guarantee thing now. That would give you the flexibility to maybe draft a running back. May give you flexibility to trade up from their second round pick, or from their second round pick, and maybe back up into the first round. Figure things out, or package him along with that second round pick to move back up to maybe get an offensive tackle that you need. If you can get creative and get a good offer, I think, Jack, that we've learned from before with other players around here, that take the for sure thing now in terms of draft capital, and don't bet on a guy straightening out, because the history here hasn't really worked out.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back, back when the Browns were being offered a second round pick and a player for Josh Gordon, and, we had to, and Joe Banner said that they strongly considered it, but, Stefanski said, don't do it. He goes, we can straighten him out. And look, unfortunately, we all know what happened with Josh Gordon, and we ended up getting only a 5th or 6th round pick for him 5 years after the fact. So yeah, like you said, if there's something that could be had for Kareem Hunt, and obviously with this, recent incident, that might take a hit as far as what teams would be willing to give up in a trade. But I mean, if a team comes calling with that mid-round pick, I think the Browns should strongly consider moving on, because you can find running backs, and we already have our bell cow and Nick Chubb, but we certainly need depth. And while Kareem Hunt is talented, like I said, you have to wonder if it's worth the investment at this point.
Yeah, you can even find running backs as undrafted free agents too. So there's certainly plenty of running backs that come out every year in the draft, and I think there will be an opportunity to find one if the Browns so choose to do that and move away from Hunt. So I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this as we move on towards the draft. The other news that came down today is the Browns GM search is, I guess you could say, hit a bump in the road. The assistant GM for the Minnesota Vikings, George Paton, withdrew his name from the search. Jack, when you look at how long this has taken, where they're currently at, you're in the Senior Bowl. They sent Alonzo Highsmith and Elliot Wolf down to the Senior Bowl without having a general manager. What is your take on George deciding to withdraw his name from the search at this juncture of them being, 2-3 weeks into this search?
Yeah, I mean, the more that this went on, the more that I thought he was definitely mulling this over. And I think this was a difficult choice for him. He has turned down chances to be general manager in the past from other teams, even the Browns reportedly a couple times. But, he took 2 interviews, which made me think he definitely was considering this. But I think once he sat down with his family, sat down with some people from Minnesota, the more he felt like it just wasn't the right fit. And that's what's being reported by NFL Network, ESPN. Like, he did strongly consider it, but I just think he didn't want to uproot his family at this point. He has a strong relationship with Rick Spielman. They've worked together their entire tenure in Minnesota, and even going back to days in Miami and Chicago. And, according to, I think it was Jeremy Fowler, he said that, it was unfinished business in Minnesota. Like, he wasn't ready to take that GM job. And I think he'll still get chances down the road, but I just think that he wants to see if Minnesota can get over the hump and potentially get a Super Bowl here in the next couple of years before he finally decides to pull the plug and finally become a general manager.
Yeah, this certainly opens the door for other opportunities. I think when you look at where this GM search has gone, I think it's going to lead all the way back to Andrew Berry. Once Stefanski decided to take the job here, Berry was the hot name and thought he was going to be kind of a shoo-in for the job. Would you be okay if it's Andrew Berry? And if it's not Andrew Berry, is it a complete unmitigated disaster?
Yeah, I have no problem with Andrew Berry. I mean, we sat here, was it a week or nearly 2 weeks ago when they hired Stefanski, that we all thought that it was going to be Andrew Berry as the GM, and then George Paton dived into the mix, and then we all thought it was going to be him. I mean, from all accounts, like, it was heading that way. If it's not Andrew Berry, it is an unmitigated disaster. I mean, they've only interviewed one other person, Monty Osentfort from the New England Patriots. It's unclear if he's really a contender in the job, or is he going to have maybe a secondary role under Berry because he's available, I think, as of now, to be hired for any role. But yeah, it's just so interesting. Like, we don't have a GM, and the Senior Bowl's going on, although I'm confident that Wolf and Highsmith and the scouting department have done a solid work this week, interviewing players, watching everybody, bringing back some great information and intel from Mobile. So I'm not worried yet, but, like, say this stretches out even further and we get close to the combine and there's no GM left, that's when I'll start getting worried, because the combine, is more chances to meet with these players, but you also start laying the groundwork towards free agency and maybe even potential trades. So the more time this takes, the more I start to get a little concerned. But as of now, I'm not concerned at all about the way that the Browns are approaching this.
When it's all said and done, whoever comes in here, based on how long it's taken, who do you think is going to have final say in all of this? Is it going to be Stefanski? Is it going to be potentially Andrew Berry? Is it going to be Paul DePodesta? Who's going to have the final say in terms of all this roster decisions and whatnot?
I still think it's going to be whoever the GM is. I mean, I'm sure Stefanski will have some say. DePodesta, there's just such a, like, I don't know how to say this. I think there is misinformation when it comes to him. I look at him more of as like a team president, where I think he's overseeing everything, but he's not making roster decisions. He's not drafting players. He's pretty much laying out, like, the framework of how they want things done, but he's letting the people that they're putting in place make those decisions and doing the work and making the final decisions. I think he's putting his input in. I think, obviously the analytical side of things, I'm sure he is throwing his name in there and saying and giving data and all that, but I don't think he's making decisions. I think he's just overseeing everything, putting people into place, and then letting those people do their jobs.
Yeah, I kind of hope that's all his job is. I don't know I want him necessarily involved in picking players, but in terms of evaluating based on their set of scouting, I'm trying to think of the right way. Scouting I don't know why I can't think of the right word, but the requirements, I guess, well, is what I'm trying to say. I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay, if he's going to be one of the final guys that says we have to pick this guy because this, and this. I'm perfectly fine with him giving all the information to whoever's making the final decision and having that be the flow of information and command in terms of picking players. Are you okay with how long this is taking?
Yeah, I like that they're being deliberate. I like they're being thorough. I'm shocked that there hasn't been more interviews. I mean, Paton's interviewed twice. Osenfort was the other interview, and Andrew Berry was the third interview. And I could have thought, I know that they said they would interview 3 to 5 candidates, but I was shocked that it was only those 3. I thought they would interview a couple more people, especially because they've had time. But it doesn't worry me. I think Barry was going to be their guy. Then Paton wowed him in their interview, and maybe they were heading towards Paton. Now they're going to go back to Barry. Although you haven't heard much on that, which makes me wonder, is Barry really want this? Is he waiting for the opportunity to maybe interview for Carolina? Because I know they were interested. I just kind of want some clarity on what's going on with Andrew Berry. Hopefully this weekend we might hear something about that, but that's the only concern I really have about the search so far.
While we don't have clarity in the general manager search, we do have some clarity in Kevin Stefanski putting his offensive staff together and his defensive staff as well. The only 2 that he kept from the previous staff is Stump Mitchell, the running backs coach, and Mike Prefer, the special teams coordinator. Both great moves on his part. It's unclear who the offensive coordinator is going to be at this moment, but he did hire Bill Callahan as his offensive line coach, Chad O'Shea as his wide receivers coach. O'Shea was the Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator last year. Before that, he was in New England. Today he hired Drew, probably butchered his name, Drew Petzing as a tight end coach. He's a former Vikings wide receiver coach. He was an intern under Norv Turner back in 2013 when he was with the Browns. And then he hired Joe Woods as the defensive coordinator. Jack, let's start with the OC. They've interviewed a couple different guys. Scaringello, who was with the Denver Broncos. And today they interviewed Ben McAdoo, who is a former head coach of the New York Giants. Those are the only 2 official interviews that they've had at this point. But our thought is they're probably waiting for either Mike McDaniel or LaFleur from San Francisco, who plays in the Super Bowl a week and a half from now. If it's down to those 4 per se, is there anyone that you prefer over the other? Is there anyone that they would hire that you would think would be a mistake?
I really hope that it's one of the San Fran guys, just because, if they were going to hire an offensive coordinator, you think they would, although maybe Stefanski's just being thorough and deliberate, just much like the Browns are being with their GM search. Scangarello, I could see coming in as a potential QB coach. He has that background, but he also has the offensive background of, working in Denver. He knows the wide zone blocking scheme that seems to be what Stefanski's going to run here. He comes out of the Shanahan Kubiak system, so that's good. McAdoo is another potential guy to be QB coach. He was in Green Bay. But yeah, I'm really leaning towards McDaniel and LaFleur at this point. My only thing is, there's been the perception that Shanahan won't let these guys go unless they're absolutely going to be offensive play callers, which I would think Stefanski would definitely relinquish that to get one of those guys here, just because they have studied under McDaniel or Shanahan for so long that they had to have learned some things, and I think would be successful in that route. Plus, they are climbing the coaching ranks and will probably be future offensive coordinators or head coaches within the next 5 years. So I'm really hoping they go that route and get one of these young up and coming guys. I think they would be great fits here in Cleveland.
What do you think about if they were to go after Ben McAdoo? I know he's an offensive coordinator in New York for a little while before being promoted to head coach. What would you think of him being the OC for the Browns?
I mean, I think it would be okay. My only thing is, like, what was his relationship like with Odell Beckham? Like, he was his offensive coordinator for 2 years. He was his head coach for 2 years. There was that, Shermer was linked to the Browns immediately when Stefanski got hired. And then I had to be reminded that there was a beef between Shermer and Beckham. So you have to wonder about that relationship. Obviously, I don't think Odell would completely disrespect his coaches, but he had a tough time in New York, didn't win a lot. So I would have to know, like, what that relationship is like. But, he has a strong offensive background. He's worked for the Saints, the 49ers, the Packers, and the Giants in a number of roles. So, and he's still young. He still might get another shot as a head coach. So he's got that offensive background. He's got the coaching experience that could help Stefanski. So it wouldn't be a popular hire, I think, initially, but with his background, I think it could be a under the radar type move for the Browns and Stefanski.
Well, let's put it this way. And here are Odell's totals for 3 of the 4 years that Ben McAdoo was there. The 4th year, Odell was injured and only played in 4 games. So, as a rookie, he had 130 targets, 91 receptions, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. Second year, 158 targets, 96 receptions, 1,450 yards, 13 touchdowns. Third year, 169 targets, 101 receptions, 1,367 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So I think it was very clear because McAdoo was calling plays when he was there that he wanted to get Odell Beckham the ball, which seemed to be the biggest flaw in the offense last year. I know Odell wasn't 100% all year, but it certainly seems like McAdoo's one that will get Odell Beckham the football.
Yeah, I was just looking it up while you were gone, or while you were talking. McAdoo said that he regrets mishandling. He regretted mishandling Odell Beckham during his time. He said he was too busy trying to scheme ways to get him the ball that he didn't step back and see the big picture the way he should have. So, yeah, he did get him the ball a lot, but, in Cleveland, he wouldn't have to worry about just getting him the ball because there's a lot of more weapons around Odell than there was in New York. I mean, he's got Landry here. He's got Chubb, potentially Kareem Hunt, potentially David Njoku, hopefully Rashard Higgins, and who knows what else they could bring in. So, Ben, hopefully he's learned from his mistakes. And if he comes here and is a potential offensive coordinator, although it's unclear like what his role was and what he was interviewing for, I feel like he would do a much better job than what he did in New York. And it's nice that he admitted to that. And I do think it's funny because I just thought of this. Stefanski met with Odell on Thursday. Maybe he asked him, hey, what was your relationship like with Ben McAdoo? What was he like as a coach? So maybe Stefanski was leaning on Odell for some advice and input. So it'd be all interesting to see if McAdoo ultimately gets a role here in Cleveland.
Let's take a look at the other 3 hires he made on the offensive staff. I mentioned earlier they hired Bill Callahan, Chad O'Shea, and Drew Petzing. Which of those 3 guys, Jack, do you think could make the most impact for the Browns as a coach?
I'm actually going to say both Callahan and O'Shea, I think, are going to make very good hires for the Browns. I know a lot of people were shocked that they had parted ways with James Campen. I think he did some good here. I think, I thought Wyatt Teller made strides as a right guard, and he could potentially be the right guard going forward. He's still only 25, so there's still room to grow. Obviously, you can only do so much with 2 bad offensive tackles in Robinson and Hubbard. And then we all know what kind of guys Treader and Patonio are, obviously. But to get Bill Callahan, who I think is actually an upgrade at the offensive line coach, I mean, you look at his history, his time in Dallas, building up that strong offensive line with Zach Martin, Leo Collins, Tyron Smith, among others, Travis Frederick. I mean, he did great work there. And then he goes to Washington. Brandon Scherf, who's actually an unrestricted free agent and potentially could be a Browns target in free agency, was among that offensive line group. Sean Laval was there too, former Browns pick, and Washington had a strong offensive line the 4 years Callahan was there. So, and he comes with some head coaching experience. Coached the Raiders the last time they were in the Super Bowl, and then was the interim coach at the end of last year. The Chad O'Shea hire, I mean, wasn't the best offensive coordinator in Miami, but you look at his work in New England as the wide receivers coach. He coached Moss, he coached Edelman, Amendola, Brandon Cooks, Josh Gordon for a season. Like, he's worked with some great wide receivers. He's coming in. He's going to coach 2 more great wide receivers in Landry and Beckham. And then whoever else comes in behind them, he's had some significant work with wide receivers. So I think both of those hires are going to be excellent. And kudos to Stefanski. He's putting together a strong staff so far. And I know people are going to say, well, we were praising Freddie Kitchens' ability to build a staff a year ago. Thing is, he didn't build that staff. It was all Dorsey for the most part, from my understanding. So I think Stefanski's doing an excellent job so far putting his staff together.
And the last one we haven't talked about yet is Joe Woods. He comes to the Browns as their defensive coordinator. What did you think of this hire in terms of moving on from Steve Wilkes, who was in the running to stay as defensive coordinator, but moving on from him and bringing in Joe Woods to be the DC?
Yeah, I mean, it's not official yet, but all signs are pointing that way. He has done some great work with that 49ers secondary. They're one of the top pass defenses in the league. Shut down Aaron Rodgers for the most part last week in the NFC Championship game. They've been great all year. He has defensive coordinator experience before, was the coordinator with Vance Joseph in Denver a couple years ago. And according to Ben Albright, he was recommended by Wade Phillips, who was also rumored to be a potential defensive coordinator for the Browns. It wouldn't shock me if he potentially comes in as a senior advisor or some kind of role. He hasn't been linked anywhere else. Obviously, if Phillips recommended him, maybe Woods brings him on in some capacity on the defensive side of the ball for the coaching staff. So we'll see how this plays out. TJ Carey worked under him in Oakland, had high praise for him. Richard Sherman had high praise on Twitter when a Browns fan asked him about Woods. So we'll see how this all plays out. But, like I said, I think Stefanski's doing a fine job. It'll be interesting to see how he fills out the rest of the staff.
Yeah, I think we're all curious about that because we're at a point where I think we would like to have the staff in place, especially when you're scouting players for the draft. You want to have all those position coaches, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator in place, so you can figure out the type of players that they want to fit in their systems. I know, the great coaches can put any player in any system and make them succeed, but I know coaches tend to lean towards guys that fit what they want to do in terms of scheme. So hopefully this coaching staff can get wrapped up very soon. In other news, not Browns related, Eli Manning decided to retire from the NFL. There was a lot of talk that maybe he would go to a different team for another year or two, but he decided to hang it up today, Jack. And Eli comes with a lot of criticism, a lot of praise. He did end up winning 2 Super Bowls with the New York Giants. And I guess the question I want to ask you is, there's a lot of talk about whether or not Eli is a Hall of Famer or not. What is your opinion on that take?
Yeah, I mean, he is a Hall of Famer. He won't go first ballot. I don't think that'll happen, but he's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, he ranks top 10 in every major statistic. I mean, he won 2 Super Bowls, and I know a lot of people are going to say he wasn't the reason behind those Super Bowl wins. It was their great defense. It was their running game. Look, he made 2 of the greatest throws, not only in Super Bowl history, but NFL history. both against the Patriots, the one to David Tyree, and then the one to Mario Manningham. And, I mean, he stepped up, made big-time plays when they needed to, and put them in a position to win. There's no doubt he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's one of the underrated, disrespected quarterbacks of this generation. It's nice to see he's getting the love and recognition that he deserves. You know, Tom Brady even congratulated him on a career today. I mean, he won as many Super Bowls as his brother Paton. I mean, you look at the numbers. Yeah, he threw a lot of interceptions. He wasn't the most accurate thrower, but like I said, he showed up in big time moments, made the throws when he needed to, and he's got 2 Super Bowl rings to show it. So he won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's definitely a Hall of Famer in my book. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he definitely is. I had another question for you. If you had to put only one of these 2 players in the Hall of Fame, and they were both taken in the same draft, Eli Manning or Phillip Rivers, which one would you put in?
Which one would I put in first, or which one I put in period?
Which one would be the only one that you could put in?
I would go Eli, because he's got the playoff wins, he's got the Super Bowl rings to back him up. Rivers has had a great career. He's still got the opportunity to win a Super Bowl potentially. I mean, I know he's going to keep playing. There's been rumors this week where he might end up in 2020, but at the end of the day, I'm going Eli over Rivers.
Is Rivers a Hall of Fame quarterback if he never makes it to a Super Bowl?
Much like Eli, yeah, he won't be in on the first try, but I think, a few years down the road after his first year of eligibility, I think he would get in. I mean, if Dan Fouts got in, trying to compare him to other quarterbacks. You look at Dan Fouts, prime example. San Diego quarterback, put up incredible numbers. I don't know if he was I don't know what year he got in on his eligibility, but he eventually made the Hall of Fame. I would think Rivers would too. I mean, the Hall of Fame debate is always so fascinating in each sport. I mean, honestly, it's a museum. It's to honor the history of the game. Can you tell the history of football without Phillip Rivers? Especially in this generation, I don't think you can. So I definitely think he belongs.
And to hammer home Eli being a Hall of Famer with the point you just used, he doesn't. One of those Super Bowl wins isn't there, and if he doesn't throw that pass to David Tyree, if he doesn't escape the pressure and at least get the ball off to where Tyree can have an opportunity to make that catch, because in today's NFL, there are a lot of quick whistles when it comes to quarterbacks kind of being tackled, and that was certainly an opportunity for one to be blown when 2 or 3 different guys had a hand on him, but he was able to escape the pressure, get that throw off, and Tyree was able to make an incredible catch. So there is no beating the undefeated Patriots without that. And to me, he's certainly a Hall of Famer. Is there anything else that you want to discuss before we get out of here?
Nope, just want to remind people to check out our last episode with Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns, where we talk Senior Bowl and the NFL Draft. And also go check out the Browns Blitz podcast. Myself and Anthony were on earlier this week too. Had a good time with Jeff and Rod Bloom, so definitely go check out that podcast as well. Yeah,
absolutely do that. Next week, we're going to have quite a bit of content for y'all to listen to. Monday, we'll do kind of a normal episode where we have Browns news first, but then on the back end of that episode, we are going to start to preview the Super Bowl. We're going to take a look both at the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs and look at how they got to this current point of getting ready to play in Super Bowl 54. Then later on in the week, we will have Stephen Thomas for aka Browns Mock Draft on the episode. We'll kind of wrap up the Senior Bowl, look ahead to the Combine a little bit, give you our Super Bowl predictions with him. So we have plenty of content coming next week, and always be sure to read us over at the Dogland. Be sure to follow Jack on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. Follow me on Twitter at Anthony Jokey, Jokey. Be sure to follow the website at the Dogland on Twitter as well. We absolutely appreciate everybody that has read us so far. We've already surpassed our best month. We still got about a week to go in January, so we appreciate everybody that's been reading us. With all that, we're going to get on out of here. Most importantly, go Browns.